After living with my husband for over 11 years, there had been signs of betrayal that I ignored, until I accidentally caught my husband, Grayson, holding hands and wrapping his arm around the waist of a young woman in the elevator of an unfamiliar building. The moment he saw me, he froze, quickly let go, his face changed color. The girl tilted her head, eyes curious. "Babe, who is she?" Grayson stammered. But before he could speak, I calmly said, "I'm his wife. I'm Amanda Walker, 37 years old, founder of Boston Pet Care Veterinary, living with my husband, Grayson, in a 3-bedroom apartment in the heart of Boston." That morning, on a chilly October day, I carried Ruby, the golden retriever who had recovered after 3 weeks of treatment for stomach pain and diarrhea caused by ingesting salted snow, to return her to her previous owner, Mrs. Lorraine, a wealthy widow living in the penthouse on the 38th floor of Huntington Tower. After handing Ruby over, I gave her instructions on how to care for the dog to avoid common winter illnesses, then bent down to kiss Ruby goodbye before stepping into the elevator to return to my clinic. When the elevator stopped on the 36th floor, the doors opened and a familiar figure stepped in. It was my husband, Grayson. His arm wrapped around the waist of a young woman, the two laughing and exchanging intimate glances. The scent of expensive perfume, mixed with a faint latte aroma, lingered in the air. The moment he saw me, Grayson froze, quickly let go of her, his face momentarily tightening. The girl tilted her head, eyes curious. "Babe, who's she?" Before Grayson could stumble out an answer, I spoke calmly. "I'm his wife." The space thickened with silence, broken only by the steady hum of the elevator. Grayson regained composure and muttered, "She's just a colleague, my pickleball buddy." The girl smiled. "He's pretty strong on the court." I almost asked, "And in your bed too?" But instead, I smiled and gently replied, "Enjoy your outing." When the door opened, I stepped out, keeping my breath steady. I knew I wouldn't be able to return to the clinic. My mind was too scattered to focus on anything. Instead, I drove straight home and started cooking dinner, like any other day, as if nothing had just happened. Under the soft yellow glow of the kitchen light, water trickling between my fingers, I wondered how long I had been married to this man. 11 years. Grayson, head of investment at Meriton Capital, left the house every morning in an Italian suit, Rolex watch, Tom Ford scent, and promises of success just around the corner. Outwardly, he was the perfect man, but behind the scenes, I had bailed him out of debt more than once, from credit card bills to the Lexus registered in my name. The signs of betrayal had started appearing months ago, coming home late, claiming urgent projects, and carrying a second phone. I had trusted him and ignored those signs. Now, what I regret the most isn't his betrayal, but that I didn't trust my own intuition. The next morning, Grayson acted like nothing had happened. He walked into the kitchen holding a bouquet of white tulips, my favorite, their gentle fragrance spreading across the room. He smiled, his voice trying to be soft. "I was a little thoughtless yesterday." "That girl's just a pickleball friend. I was afraid you'd misunderstand." I looked up at him, silent for a moment, then answered evenly, "I didn't misunderstand anything. I just don't want it to happen again." His smile faltered for a second, then quickly returned to its usual confident look. He poured coffee, leaned against the counter, and said in a voice that tried to sound weary, "I've been under a lot of stress lately. The company's projects are under profit pressure. I just needed to blow off some steam on the court." I nodded, not arguing. He took that as a sign of safety and continued, "I'll get things in order. You know I'm always trying for our future." I gave him a faint smile and replied, "I know." When Grayson left, the soft click of the door sounded like the period at the end of a lifeless conversation. I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the bouquet of tulips he left on the table. A petal had fallen, soaked with leftover water from the glass vase, the only thing in the house that was honest. By noon, I returned to the clinic, resuming surgery on a dog that had swallowed a foreign object. My hands remained steady, but my mind kept circling back to that elevator scene. Every mechanical breath, every surgical light only made it clearer. I could no longer believe those tired excuses. That evening, when Grayson came home, I still cooked as usual, his favorite pasta. He sat across from me, telling stories from his day, laughing at jokes only he found amusing. I listened, nodded, responded just enough for him to believe I was still the gentle, forgiving wife. But inside, I was quietly watching. Every detail. When he left the house, the hidden phone, the late-night texts, I noted it all. I didn't need to get angry. I needed clarity. And I knew, to get that, I had to start planning. At 11 p.m., while Grayson was fast asleep, his loud snores echoing through the bedroom, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the Boston city lights reflected in my glass of red wine. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a name I'd saved years ago. Paul Henson, a private investigator and former Boston police officer who once helped me track down a kidnapped foster cat. This time, the target wasn't a lost animal. It was the truth. I dialed. When he picked up, his deep, calm voice came through. "Miss Walker? Haven't heard your voice in a long time." I took a deep breath and said, "I need to know where my husband is on the nights he says he's working late, and where his money is going. I want everything done, legally." Paul was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I understand. Send me a few basic details and I'll start from there." In the days that followed, I tried to keep my routine as normal as possible, as if nothing had changed. At the clinic, I treated a cat with a broken leg caught in a car door and injected antibiotics into a dog suffering from acute moist dermatitis. The animal trembled in my hands, its eyes reflecting a vague fear I understood more than anyone. When their owners came to pick them up, they thanked me with sincere hugs, and I smiled, trying to keep my heart from drifting toward suspicion. At noon, I stood in the back courtyard of the clinic, watching a flock of sparrows perch on the fence. The Boston sky was cold and gray, yet strangely clear. I told myself, "Be patient. The truth will come, like a wound that needs time to bleed, before it can heal." 3 days later, Paul called back. His voice was raspier, tinged with hesitation. "I think you should sit down before you hear this." I gripped the phone tighter, trying to stay calm. He continued, "Grayson is renting an apartment on the 36th floor of Huntington Tower, the exact place where you saw them. The lease is under the company's name, marked as Investment Project Support." I let out a quiet, emotionless laugh, simply confirming what I already knew. "I want everything documented," I said. Paul replied, "I'll gather all legal evidence, bank statements, receipts, vehicle tracking, and if necessary, pull the security footage." After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. Outside the window, snow began to fall, thin and cold, just like the truth settling over everything around me. I pulled out my brown leather planner, the one I use for patient appointments, opened to a new page, and wrote the first line in small, firm handwriting. December 14th. The truth begins. A week later, Paul sent me an email with a brief subject line. Video and verified documents. 36B Huntington. I opened the attachments, each frame appearing in high definition. Every clip, every receipt, every timestamp marked dates from months ago. Precisely the days Grayson told me he was on a business trip, meeting with clients, or catching up with an old friend. In the first video, Grayson and that young woman were pushing a shopping cart together at a Whole Foods near Back Bay, their hands brushing, sharing intimate smiles like they were living a different marriage. I checked the date on the camera, Friday, July 3rd. I remembered that night clearly. He texted that he had to fly to New York to meet an investor, while I stayed overnight at the clinic monitoring a critical surgery. I had believed him, even texted, "Stay warm, don't forget your stomach meds." The second clip played. They were browsing the baby section, testing small oak cribs. The woman placed a hand on her belly and smiled at Grayson, while he bent down and said something that made her laugh. The date. Sunday, August 16th. I remembered that weekend. He claimed he had to work overtime to finish the quarterly report. I even brought him coffee to the Meriton Capital office, but he replied, "Don't come, I'm in a closed meeting." Now I understood why he didn't want me there. Paul included several clips from the basement security cameras. Grayson unlocking the door to apartment 36B with a keycard, carrying grocery bags, followed minutes later by the woman in a gray robe greeting him with a quick kiss. Under the footage, Paul noted, "They stayed in the apartment the entire weekend. Grayson's car was parked here from Friday evening to Sunday afternoon." I paused at the last frame. The yellow light cast on his face. Relaxed, at ease, so unlike the exhausted expression he always brought home. The final part of the email was a set of documents, bills and statements. I skimmed through. Dinner at La Fiorentina, the Italian restaurant where we celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary. Charged to the same credit card I helped him pay off just months ago. I stared at the line, "Thank you, Mr. Walker," printed on the receipt, and let out a dry, lifeless laugh. I reopened the last video, the two of them sitting side by side, red wine in hand, candlelight flickering across the table. Grayson looked content, carefree, as if life with me was a duty, and that place was where he truly felt free. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt disgusted at his deception, at how seamlessly he played his role. And as I sifted through my memories, I realized every word he'd said over the past months, every meeting, every trip, every old friend, had been carefully crafted pieces of a life I never knew he lived. I closed the screen, set the laptop aside, and sat quietly in the dark. Streetlights cast fractured reflections on the wall, hollow and cold. I inhaled deeply, then opened my leather notebook. Below the previous line, I wrote another, sharp and deliberate. From now on, every move I make will be intentional. 2 days after I wrote that line, Paul called again. His voice was gruffer and heavier than usual. "Amanda, I'm afraid this isn't just about infidelity." I heard papers rustling on his end, followed by a faint sigh. "I found a property sale contract in New Hampshire. The lakeside house under your name. It was sold 3 months ago. The signature on the contract is yours, but it's not your handwriting." I froze, gripping the receiver tightly. "Are you sure?" I asked. Paul responded firmly. "Absolutely." "I've sent you a scanned copy along with the wire transfer receipt. The payment went to an investment trust owned by Grayson." I opened the email, eyes scanning each page. The signature was nearly perfect, but I always curved the last stroke of my name slightly to the left. Here, it ended with a heavier, sharper flick. A small detail, but enough to tell me. Grayson had forged my signature. I picked up the phone and called Nora Bennett, my best friend and a corporate lawyer at a major financial firm in Boston. She picked up almost instantly. "Amanda!" "What's going on?" I sent her the entire file and waited. 10 minutes later, Nora called back. Her voice was firm. "This is civil contract forgery. If you want, I can report this to the New Hampshire Department of Justice immediately." I remained silent for a long time, then said slowly, "Not yet." "Thank you, Nora. I just needed confirmation." On the other end, she sighed. "Amanda, this isn't just marital betrayal anymore. This is fraud." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I know. And I'll handle it properly." I sat in the small office behind the clinic, usually used for pet medical records, staring through a frosted window. Outside, a few snowflakes fell onto the brick courtyard, melting as they touched the ground. I thought of my mother, the one who left me that lakeside home as a childhood gift, where I learned to swim, where I once listened to the wind rustling through pine trees. Now, that house had vanished from my name with nothing more than a signature and a man I once called husband. I realized then, emotional betrayal was only the surface. Deeper, more venomous, was financial betrayal, where someone doesn't just steal your love, but takes what you've worked your whole life to protect. 3 days later, Paul called again. His tone this time was slower, laced with hesitation, as if searching for a way to lessen the blow. "Amanda, I've uncovered a few more things about the woman." I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply. "Go on, Paul." On the other end, he exhaled softly and said, "Cleo is not Grayson's colleague, as he claimed. She works at a marketing firm in the same building as Meriton Capital. She's far from innocent. She previously hired a private investigator to learn Grayson's preferences, habits, and personal life before approaching him directly. And most importantly, she knew you and Grayson had been married for over 11 years and still had no children." I leaned back in my chair, my palms icy cold. Paul's voice continued, hoarse and dry. "She's currently pregnant. But the father might not be Grayson. It could be her ex-boyfriend Dylan, a fitness trainer who used to work at the gym in that same building." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. I stared at the blank space in front of me, where the office wall glowed under the dim light of the desk lamp. What I'd just heard was absurd. A man who betrayed his wife over a lie, and a woman willing to carry someone else's child to anchor a man with money. I opened my laptop and revisited old photos of Grayson. At conferences, charity galas, on my birthday. Always standing tall, smiling on cue, speaking just right. A perfect man in everyone's eyes, and now a pawn in the hands of a woman more calculating than he ever imagined. I shut the screen and rested my forehead on my hand. There was no more rage, no more pain, only a cold, hollow emptiness, as if I had just witnessed the end of a play I was forced to star in. I felt no satisfaction, no vindication, only pity, for two people so steeped in deceit they could no longer tell the difference between love and manipulation. I turned back to my desk, pulled out my notebook, and wrote a short, sharp line. "The truth always speaks. I just have to wait for the moment it does." I put the pen down and stared at the line I had just written. A strange silence settled over the room, not the kind born of pain, but one of absolute clarity. I understood now. If Grayson could fabricate an entire life of lies, then I could build a stage where the truth would be presented in a way that no one could deny. That evening, after he left the house with the excuse of attending a party with old friends, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into our joint bank account. The numbers that flickered on the screen made my blood run cold. Grayson had transferred nearly $30,000 in the past 2 months, most of it labeled as project expenses I didn't wait. I withdrew all remaining funds from our joint account into a private account under my name and locked all shared credit cards. Each step was carried out slowly, precisely, like a surgeon removing a tumor without spilling a single drop of blood. When I finished, I opened a new folder on my computer and titled it The Honest Husband. Inside, I began writing the opening lines of what would not be a lecture, not an accusation, but a forensic report on deceit. The first page held just one sentence. "Every lie has a shape." I reopened the files Paul had sent. Videos, receipts, forged contracts, wire transfers. I sorted each piece of evidence chronologically, with clean, clear annotations, almost aesthetically arranged like a medical report. I inserted photos of Grayson and her at the supermarket, the La Fiorentina bill, the home sale contract, and a side-by-side image of my real signature next to the fake, an unmistakable contrast, like a visual lesson on guilt. Each night, while Boston slept, I would tweak the slides, adjusting the background color, the fonts, the order of images. I added captions carefully, choosing words so that each phrase would land like a precise incision, deep enough that no one in that room would ever forget. By day, my work at the clinic kept me steady, but by night, I became someone else, silent, focused, unflinching. I watched my reflection in the soft glow of the screen, sharp, cold, resolved. I was no longer a betrayed wife. I was a surgeon preparing for the most significant operation of my life, the dissection of the truth. A few days later, over dinner, Grayson poured wine and said casually, "I'm thinking of throwing a party for our 12th anniversary. Might invite my boss and a few big clients. It could be a good networking opportunity. I set my glass down and looked at him. His face was so calm that had I not known the truth, I might have believed he was being sincere. But I understood. He was staging another performance, and this time I would be holding the script. I smiled and nodded. Sounds like a great idea. Invite whoever you like. I'll take care of the rest. As in previous years, he handled the guest list, and I planned the event, selected the restaurant, designed the space. The only difference this year was that I wasn't planning it for love, but for justice. 3 days later, Grayson sent me the list. Mostly executives, colleagues, and a few family members. I glanced over it and asked, "You didn't invite Cleo?" He looked up, startled, voice stammering. "Cleo?" I figured. It wasn't necessary. She's just a co-worker, I smiled faintly, my gaze steady. If there's nothing inappropriate between you two, then inviting her shouldn't be a problem. On the contrary, it would prove your innocence. Grayson sat still for a few seconds, then nodded, trying to sound confident. Sure, if that's what you want. That night, I sat on the sofa and opened the reservation calendar. I chose Langford Hall, a refined venue near the Charles River, equipped with excellent acoustics, a large projector screen, and lighting perfect for an anniversary celebration. I submitted the booking request and forwarded Nora a summary of the plan. The next day, when I explained it to Nora over the phone, she sighed. "What are you planning to do, Amanda? Break down in front of everyone?" I let out a soft laugh, my voice so calm it even surprised me. No, I don't plan to cry. I plan to teach them a lesson about honesty. The line went silent. On the other end, Nora said nothing. She knew that when I spoke in that tone, gentle, measured, but firm, it meant every step had been carefully calculated. I looked out the window at the Boston lights reflecting on the Charles River, subtle, cold. I sipped my lukewarm coffee and smiled. The truth was about to have an audience. That evening, Boston was drenched in the chill of late December, the sky veiled in a faint mist reflecting the lights along the Charles River. I stepped out of the car, took a deep breath, and adjusted my dress. The high-neck black gown I wore was a gift from Grayson on our 5th anniversary. Smooth satin, form-fitting, modest enough to exude power, yet elegant enough to hide the fact that I was preparing for a public execution. Around my neck, a string of white pearls shimmered, the same wedding gift from 12 years ago, a symbol of purity he had long since shattered. The Langford Hall banquet space was adorned with lilies and white candles, long tables draped in silk, crystal glasses aligned with precision, fine wine chilled in silver buckets. Everything looked elegant, flawless. No one would suspect that in just minutes, this setting would transform into the stage for an ugly truth. I entered, feeling eyes follow me. Grayson stood at the far end of the hall, clad in a tailored navy suit, a confident smile fixed to his face like a mask. When he saw me, his eyes paused just long enough to project the image of a devoted husband. But what made me suppress a laugh was the moment he passed Cleo without a glance, without a word, like strangers. Yet I knew. They had slept together the night before, under the guise of playing sports. I walked past them, a faint smile on my lips, a smile whose meaning only I knew. This was the last night he would ever get to perform. Cleo stood near the table in a tight red dress, her eyes darting toward me. She had no idea that I knew everything. In that moment, all I saw was a young woman trying to act confident, unaware she was about to become the prologue of the most brutal presentation of her life. Grayson approached, champagne in hand, and whispered, "You look incredible tonight." I tilted my head and replied softly, "So do you." "I hope you'll enjoy the special part of tonight," he smiled, oblivious that very smile would be frozen in time moments later. When everyone was seated and the lights dimmed, I stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, my voice calm, breath steady, as if beginning a welcome speech. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our 12th wedding anniversary," I said, scanning familiar faces. "Tonight, I'd like to share something special, a story called The Honest Husband." I nodded at the technician. The background music faded. A spotlight fell on the large screen in the center of the hall. I drew in a slow breath and smiled, my last smile as someone who once loved, before beginning the most public dissection of my life. Then I signaled for the screen to light up. The room fell completely silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning system. The lights gradually dimmed, leaving me standing beneath the single spotlight. Holding the microphone, I looked straight at the crowd, my voice deep and slow. 12 years. I've learned that honesty isn't just a virtue. It's a duty. A few people chuckled softly, assuming I was about to share some inspiring tale of marriage, while Grayson leaned back in his chair, wearing his usual half-smile of confidence. He didn't know that within seconds, everything he had built was about to collapse. The first slide appeared. A security camera photo filled the large screen. Grayson and Cleo in the elevator of Huntington Tower, his hand on her waist, their eyes locked as if no other world existed. A soft wave of whispers spread across the room. I clearly heard someone from his company murmur, "Isn't that his wife?" Grayson stiffened, lifting his head to look at me, the smile gone. I continued, my voice even, like reading a report. Slide 2. The sales contract for the lakeside house in New Hampshire. The signature says it's mine, but it's forged. I never signed any document authorizing the sale of the home my mother left me. The light glinted off his face, his eyes unfocused, lips trembling slightly. I clicked to the next slide. On the screen was a scanned bank statement, showing transactions of money transferred from our joint account into a private one labeled Meriton Special Fund. An account Grayson had opened himself, used to cover the expenses of the apartment on the 36th floor. Audible gasps echoed in the room. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, and Nora, sitting beside me, gave a quiet nod. I didn't stop. Final slide, I said. Security footage from the 36th floor, recorded Friday, July 3rd, the same day he told me he was on a business trip in New York. The screen displayed footage of Grayson unlocking the apartment door, carrying groceries. Minutes later, Cleo appeared in a gray robe, greeting him with a kiss. No one spoke. The background music had stopped entirely. Only the faint static from the microphone remained. Grayson shot up from his chair, knocking it over. "Amanda, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted, his voice laced with fear and fury. I turned to him, eyes calm, no anger, no tears. "Performing a dissection of deceit," I said slowly, each word cutting like a surgical blade. He stepped toward me, reaching for the microphone, but Nora stood, blocking him. "That's enough, Grayson," she said, her voice like steel. I stepped back, signaling the technician to stop the presentation. The room sank into absolute silence. I set the microphone on the table, took a small sip of water, then looked around and spoke, my voice steady, clear. A person can lie, but evidence cannot. And tonight, I simply let the truth speak for me. No one clapped, no one laughed. Only the sound of Grayson's heavy breathing and the faint crash of the glass he had dropped, shattered like his life, right there at his own anniversary celebration. The next morning, Boston welcomed a soft drizzle, cold and fine, as if washing away the noise of the night before. I woke early, brewed a cup of coffee, and opened my phone. Right there on the financial news site, the headline read, "Meriton Capital suspends head of investment, Grayson Walker, amid internal audit." Below, the article continued, "The company is conducting a comprehensive review of personal transactions within the investment division." I read that far, sipped my coffee, and felt an unexpected calm. Paul texted me briefly. "Cleo's caught in it too. Both are under financial investigation." By noon, the news was everywhere. Cleo was fired by her marketing firm for professional misconduct. The same girl who once smiled in all those videos had now become the subject of ridicule. That afternoon, I went to Nora's office. She was waiting for me under the warm light, a thick folder on her desk. "Divorce papers, asset division agreement, clinic ownership transfer," she said briskly. I flipped through each page, read every line carefully, and signed without hesitation. When the pen lifted from the final page, a strange lightness settled over me. According to the agreement, I retained 70% of our shared assets and full ownership of Boston Pet Care Veterinary, the only thing I truly considered family. 3 days later, I returned to the old house one last time to pack my things. Everything was quiet. The wedding photo on the wall caught the light in a way that made it look like someone else's frame. No longer connected to me. I removed it, leaving the empty frame on the table, a polite period at the end of a fabricated marriage. I packed a few clothes, some documents, and my laptop into the trunk of the car. When I shut the door, I didn't look back. The Lexus engine started with a soft purr in the damp air. I drove across the Longfellow Bridge, the city of Boston stretching out behind me. Once a place of memories, now just an old backdrop. I took nothing with me except what belonged to me, and a mind steady enough to begin again. 1 week later, I signed the purchase contract for the penthouse on the 61st floor of the building across from my clinic. From the balcony, I could see the Boston Pet Care Veterinary sign light up every morning, a reminder that everything I have today was built by my own hands, not by carrying any man's name. The new apartment wasn't as large as the old house, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Charles River, where the morning sun poured in just enough to dissolve any lingering darkness. I brought only a few old belongings, a photo of my mother, the woman who always taught me that sometimes silence is the strongest answer, my old coffee maker, the only wedding gift I truly valued because it had been mine before we got married, and the silver necklace my grandmother gave me when I graduated college, the one item that still felt like it truly belonged. On the first day I moved in, I opened all the windows, letting the cold air blow through, sweeping out the smell of fresh paint in the past. I brewed a cup of coffee, set it on the table, and played soft jazz. The early light cast moving reflections on the walls, making the apartment feel like it had a soul. There was no more shadow of deceit. That evening, as the city lights flickered on, I opened my laptop and created a new file titled The Honest Husband. I wasn't writing for revenge, nor to turn pain into a weapon. I only wanted to record the journey I had walked, step by step, to remind myself that truth, no matter how cruel, is the only foundation upon which a person can stand. I typed the first sentence, simple and honest. Sometimes, to find honesty, you have to lose everything you once believed was real. Then I sat still, listening to the soft patter of rain against the glass, the city lights reflected in my coffee. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not because someone loved me, but because I had finally chosen myself. A few weeks later, while writing the second chapter of The Honest Husband, news of Grayson began to spread across financial headlines. It started as a small article in an investment column, but quickly went viral. Meriton Capital faces class action lawsuit, head of investment. Grayson Walker accused of financial fraud and fund misuse. The article spanned over 1,000 words, detailing how he had concealed major investment losses using falsified records and used company funds for personal expenses. His name now appeared alongside the phrase, "under federal investigation." I read the article on a Monday morning while sitting at a cafe across from my clinic. The cappuccino in front of me had gone cold, but I felt remarkably warm. Not from gloating, but because justice, finally, had begun to move. A few days later, Paul sent me a brief message. He's lost his financial license. The Department of Justice has handed the case to the feds. I replied with just 2 words. Thank you, Paul. The following month, I overheard one of Grayson's former colleagues mention that he was now living in a cheap co-living space on the outskirts of Cambridge, a place for the unemployed to share a kitchen, a living room, and tales of collapse. Grayson had been seen frequently at a nearby dive bar, hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, clutching cheap beer. From the man who once flaunted his Rolex and Italian suits, he had become a shadow of himself, empty and unraveling. And then, as life's cruel symmetry often goes, Cleo vanished. As soon as she realized Grayson had no money left, she quietly disappeared. No goodbye, no message. Months later, I heard she had given birth. The child didn't bear the Walker name and moved back in with her parents in Ohio. Her social media was wiped clean. No photos, no trace. As if she had never existed in this story at all. I stared at the update on my phone and smiled faintly. Not because they had fallen, but because at last, the performance was over, and the stage was now left to truth. Simple, cold, but fair. One late autumn afternoon, as golden leaves began covering the paths along the river, I received an unexpected call. On the other end was Mrs. Lorraine, the owner of the golden retriever from long ago. Her voice was deep and warm, tinged with the tremble of old age. "Amanda, Ruby misses you terribly." She still sits by the elevator door whenever she hears footsteps, thinking you've come back. I smiled gently, a warmth spreading through my chest. "I'll come visit her," I replied. That evening, I brought a bag of treats and some dog vitamins, driving to Huntington Tower, the place where everything had once begun. As I stepped into the lobby, I heard the echo of my own footsteps, but this time, they didn't sting. The elevator still lit up floor 38, and old memories flickered through, light as smoke. Mrs. Lorraine welcomed me with a kind smile. "She heard you from down the hall and started barking," she said, opening the door. Instantly, Ruby bounded out, barking excitedly, circling me, her tail wagging so hard it nearly knocked over a vase. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around her. Her golden fur pressed against my chest, and her deep brown eyes shone with a pure, unfiltered joy. I stroked her head gently, feeling her steady heartbeat and the familiar scent of dog fur mixed with chamomile tea in the room. I closed my eyes. The elevator, Grayson's gaze, sleepless nights, all of it faded, leaving only quiet and gratitude. I looked at Mrs. Lorraine and smiled softly. "She's loyal, still remembers someone who cared for her just a few weeks," she replied gently. "Honest creatures always recognize those who treated them truthfully." I held Ruby close, feeling her warmth seep into me, real, gentle, and steady. In that moment, I understood that loyalty still exists. It just wasn't where I had once misplaced my faith. One morning, with Boston still wrapped in a light mist, I took Ruby for a walk across the Longfellow Bridge. The Charles River breeze swept through my hair, carrying the scent of salt water and coffee from nearby cafes. The sun began to rise, golden light rippling across the water, bathing the city in the hue of new beginnings. Ruby trotted ahead, ears perked, tail swaying in the early light. I watched her, free, innocent, unburdened by the past, and smiled without thinking. In that stillness, I realized I too was learning to walk like her, peacefully, without looking back, without needing anyone to lead the way. I stopped in the middle of the bridge, the wind stronger now, tugging at strands of hair around my face. Sunlight pierced the mist, scattering reflections across the river like shards of broken glass, beautiful, honest, and unstageable. I inhaled deeply, the cold air filling my chest, and whispered, just for myself, a quiet voiceover to close the story. Honesty doesn't need forgiveness, it just needs to be seen. Ruby barked softly, then kept running forward toward the light. I followed, feeling the bridge hum beneath my feet, heart light as if I'd just set everything down. And in that moment, amid Boston's dawn, the wind, and the breath of freedom, I knew my life had truly begun again. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this one. If you believe that honesty is sometimes the loneliest road, but also the one that leads us to real freedom, share this story. Because sometimes, it only takes one person brave enough to speak the truth to help others find their way back to themselves. He locked my daughter in the garage for 2 days. I returned from a business trip, and instead of hearing her laughter, I heard faint crying coming from the garage. I opened the door and found Emily, 5 years old, exhausted, bruised, her voice hoarse from crying. When she whispered, "Daddy did it," the betrayal turned into a cold fury, and I made up my mind. I would make his life a living hell. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And let me say hello to your city. I pulled into the driveway at about 4:45, briefcase still in hand, my mind only on the glass of cold water waiting in the fridge. Quarterly reports could drain a person, even after more than a decade in business. But the silver sedan parked in my usual spot stopped me cold. Robert's car. He never came without calling first. Before I could even reach the front door, it swung open. Chloe stood there, smile stretched tight like cling wrap pulled too far. Jess, perfect timing. We have an amazing opportunity to share. I stepped inside and set my suitcase on the entryway table. Robert sat on the sofa, hands clasped between his knees. He glanced at me briefly, then looked away. On the coffee table was a pile of glossy brochures, spiral-bound packets, and small bottles with labels promising vitality and wellness. "What is this?" I asked. Chloe gestured like a game show host revealing a prize. "A golden opportunity in the wellness industry. We're talking real wealth building here, Jess. It's next-gen multi-level marketing." I walked closer and picked up a brochure, full of before and after photos, income projections shooting straight up, testimonials from strangers about their transformed lives. "How much?" "45,000. Chloe replied casually, like discussing lunch. "An investment in Robert's future. In Emily's." I looked at my husband. He still couldn't meet my eyes. "Let me see the business plan." Chloe laid out the documents, going on about breakthrough products and unlimited income. I flipped through each page, drilling into the numbers. The commission structure revealed itself quickly. 70% of income came from recruiting new distributors, not selling products. Each recruit had to buy $3,000 worth of starter inventory. In the fine print, it said only 2% of participants ever turned a profit. I grabbed my notebook and started calculating. If Robert recruited 6 people, and each of them recruited 6 more, and so on, the math collapsed under its own weight. Just 7 levels down, and you'd run out of people in Florida. "This is a pyramid scheme," I said. Chloe's smile stiffened. "People always say that about network marketing at first. Success belongs to those who believe success belongs to the 3% who got in years ago." I tapped the income disclosure buried on page 14. I pointed to the chart. "Look at these numbers, Robert. Do you understand what they're showing?" My husband mumbled something I couldn't make out. "This model needs endless recruitment," I continued. "And when the pool runs dry, and it always does, the 97% at the bottom lose everything. You're asking me to bankroll it, to invest our daughter's future just to land among the 97%. You don't understand modern business." Chloe's voice had sharpened. "I understand data." And it doesn't lie. I folded the documents and looked directly at my husband. "I can't support this. Just like I can't support 2 people having an affair and pretending to be coworkers." That's when his mask dropped. "You always doubt me. You never believed in me like Chloe does." "Never," he shot to his feet, the chair scraping against the tiled floor. "You're sitting on a pile of money while I'm trying to build something for our family. You even made me crash at Chloe's place. You never gave without strings attached." A freezing sensation gripped my chest. His voice was shaking with anger. "You made me feel like a beggar in your house." I stood up, walked to my home office, and came back 30 seconds later with a folder. Old habits die hard for a businesswoman. I kept copies of everything. I laid out the documents in chronological order. Bank statements, voided checks, loan agreements signed but never repaid. March 2022. My voice was steady. $35,000 for you to start a business. You called it a loan. I never asked for it back. Just as Chloe opened her mouth, I cut in. July 2022. $20,000 for inventory for your boutique. But he hid it. Said he was investing with a friend. That too was called a loan. The boutique shut down after 6 months. March 2023. $15,000 for a car. He said he needed a new one for work. And these little slips. Total for 2024. $20,000 spread across various things he said needed to be paid off immediately. I laid them out in a straight line. A total of $90,000. In exchange for silence. I have full documentation. Not a single cent repaid. Not a single thank you. And now I'm met with resentment. The kitchen went silent. Chloe looked at the pile of checks like she wanted to shred them. Robert stood up, still avoiding my eyes. "Let's go," he said quietly. Chloe grabbed the documents, stuffed them into her bag. Papers scattered. No one bent down to pick them up. "You'll regret this." Chloe pointed her finger into the space between us, then hissed, "I won't forget the way you treated us. Keep your money, with your personality. Robert's never coming back." Robert walked toward the door. I tried to catch his eyes one more time. "If you want to talk more, fine, but not tonight. And not about this scam. Let's go." Chloe yanked his arm. "We don't need her." I stood at the doorway and watched them head to the car. The sedan backed up too fast, tires screeching on the quiet street. I stayed there until the taillights disappeared, then turned back into the house. The kitchen counter still bore the traces of 5 years I'd spent trying to help my husband. The MLM brochure sat atop the pile of papers, bold letters promising financial freedom. I sat down slowly, placing both hands flat on the cool surface. My breathing was steady, on purpose. Something had shifted in the past hour, not shattered. Shattered implies weakness. This felt more like a recalibration, an audit of bad debts left to rot too long. I thought of how Robert never once stood up for me when Chloe accused me. The way he didn't flinch at Chloe's intimate touches. The way he just stood there, passive, as she rewrote our family history. The husband who once helped me analyze spreadsheets, who once valued honesty, who once loved me and our daughter. He had disappeared somewhere along the way. The Florida evening light poured in with its signature dull gold. I looked at those documents, adding up all the things I never asked repayment for. When you've been in business long enough, you start to see patterns. The deficit column growing, assets dwindling, the investment that never breaks even. And finally, I saw what was right in front of me. This was no longer a family. This was a transaction that had always taken from one side, a deal running at a loss for 5 years. And now they wanted another $45,000 just to keep the deficit going. The decision arrived as cleanly as a balanced equation. No more funding failure. No more pretending silence could hide betrayal. No more accounts for people who only saw me as a cash machine. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. The house felt different, maybe quieter. Or maybe I'd finally heard the absence of a relationship I had paid for, but never truly owned. The MLM flyer on the table. I tossed it into the trash. Act 2. My mother, Martha, came home just after 8 p.m., both arms full of grocery bags. She stopped at the kitchen doorway, looked me straight in the face before saying anything. "Something happened?" I told her everything, in detail. My tone calm, like I was presenting a financial report to a client. When I mentioned the $45,000 investment, her hands paused mid-motion as she was putting away vegetables, fingers still resting on the fridge door. "How much this time?" $45,000 for a disguised pyramid scheme posing as a wellness product business. Martha shut the fridge and sat down across from me. She picked up the brochure they left behind, skimmed through a few lines, then set it down. "You said no, right?" Not only did I say no, I showed them why it was wrong. "They didn't like that." She repeated, "They?" Chloe came with him. Martha reached across the table and held my hand. "Jess, you did the right thing." I exhaled, gave a sad little laugh. "I don't know. Maybe I could have been softer. Maybe my daughter would have had a more perfect family." She squeezed my hand tighter. "This is the 4th time he's come to you with these get-rich opportunities. Every time you gave money, every time it was lost, and not once did he take responsibility." She stood up, walked to the calendar by the phone, ran her finger across the crossed-out dates. Emily's birthday last October. He said he'd come, then canceled 2 hours before. Said he had work, but you and I both know he stayed, because Chloe wasn't feeling well. Thanksgiving. Christmas. Didn't show up. She turned back, voice slow. When's the last time he called just to check on you, not to ask for money? I stayed quiet. When? I can't remember either. He's 38 years old, Jess. Your daughter needs a father, not a friend who acts like one of her classmates. But he's still Emily's dad. I know. That's exactly why you need to be firm and make a smarter choice. That night, we talked until almost 10 p.m. Mom brought up things I'd tried to ignore. How Robert had changed since meeting Chloe. How Emily changed after we separated. How he only showed up when he needed something. How he let another woman speak on his behalf. She asked me, if this were a business partner, what would you advise them to do? I said, cut the losses. She looked me in the eyes. Then take your own advice. After packing and confirming my conference schedule, I stepped into Emily's room. She was sitting on her bed, hugging the teddy bear Robert had given her when she was 3. The nightlight cast a warm glow on her face, those brown eyes wide, waiting for me like she somehow sensed something was coming. I sat beside her, brushing her tangled soft hair. Mommy and Daddy won't be living in the same house anymore, sweetheart. Daddy will have his own place, but he's still your daddy. I just want you to know, no matter what, you are still so loved. Emily looked at me for a moment, then gave a tiny nod. I know. Daddy. Her words caught in my throat. Daddy always says he's busy, but I notice he only comes when he needs something, then leaves right after. I held her hand, trying to keep my voice steady. Does that make you sad? Not really sad, she said, eyes following the lamplight reflected on the wall. Daddy promised to take me to the park, then forgot. He didn't remember my birthday last year. I remember he said, next week, 3 weeks ago. Emily turned back, gently touched my cheek. It's okay, Mommy. I think you're doing the right thing. I don't want you to be sad every time Daddy comes home. Her words cut like a knife. I held her close, feeling her tiny breath steady on my chest. I didn't tell her the truth, that Robert was living with Chloe just 10 miles away. To Emily, I still said Daddy was on a work trip. I kissed her hair, whispered, Mommy will always be here. Always. Emily nuzzled into my neck, and in that moment, I felt the simplest, truest kind of love. She didn't need explanations, didn't ask for reasons. She just wanted real love. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Maybe because I had finally told my daughter the truth. Maybe because I had finally made the right decision. The next morning, everything felt eerily normal. The coffee machine hummed. The smell of toast filled the kitchen. I packed for Orlando, just a 2-day trip, with the tidy rhythm of someone who's traveled for business hundreds of times. Mom pressed a to-go coffee into my hand. Text me when you get to the hotel, okay? I always do. I know. I still worry. I bent down to kiss my daughter's forehead. Just 2 days. I'll be back Saturday afternoon. I'll bring back those little cakes you and Grandma love from the airport. She walked me to the door, waved as my car backed out of the driveway. Everything seemed neatly closed, settled. I didn't know that while I was listening to endless presentations on financial strategy at the conference, my mother was at home clearing the bathroom drawers. And I had no idea that at that exact moment, Robert was standing outside that door, silent, waiting, and about to do something that would make sure things would never be the same again. I left home at 9 a.m. Mom stayed behind to watch Emily. Orlando greeted me with a day packed full of meetings, session updates, presentation slides, handshakes. But my mind kept drifting back to last night, to the look in my daughter's eyes when she asked, Mom, are you sad? I texted home. Just arrived. Mom replied, all good. We're having noodles. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus on the papers in my hands. While I was listening to a cost accounting update, Mom went into the bathroom to clean. Later, much later, she told me, her voice still shaking, that just as she reached for the mop, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Robert walk in. "Robert! What are you doing here?" He grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved hard. She stumbled, hitting the sink, a burning scrape opening on her arm. "Robert, stop! What are you doing?" She reached into her pocket for her phone. He snatched it away. His voice was flat, as if rehearsed. "You're going to stay here until Jess transfers the money. Chloe needs it. This ends the moment she agrees to sign, before she could even process what was happening." He slammed the bathroom door shut in the garage and dragged a table across to barricade it. Emily heard the noise, ran downstairs, and met Robert at the doorway. She cried, "Daddy!" He scooped her up, set her inside the garage, and slid the latch. His hands were shaking, but his fingers didn't forget the code. He pressed twice, once to lock inside, once to bolt outside. Mom lunged forward, pushing with all her strength against the door. Useless. "Jessica's in Orlando. She won't be back for days. You can't lock me and Emily in here." Robert stepped back, eyes avoiding hers. "Stay put, Mom. She needs to learn her lesson." Mom tried everything, reasoning with him, while Emily clutched her doll, sobbing, not understanding what was happening. The little girl kept running to pound on the garage door, then turned back to help her grandmother try to move the table blocking them. "You're hurting your own daughter." "Please, there's no food in here. She's too young." "This is a crime." "You'll go to jail." Robert's face twisted for a moment. Maybe guilt. Chloe was right. Jessica's always held me back. "This is the only way she'll understand." He backed toward the front door. "Robert, please. She's supported you so many times. You know that." He hesitated for a second. "She exaggerates. That money was a small fraction of what she has. No. Jess has done everything to help you. You've seen it." He swallowed hard. "No. She has more. Chloe told me." "You're insane. You'd rather believe her than your own wife?" Robert's voice dropped. "I choose the one who loves me." Then he left, closing the main gate behind him, leaving my mother and my daughter screaming, trapped inside. 2 days, from Thursday to Saturday, my little girl had no food, no phone, no way to call for help. The garage window was too high and too small. The tempered glass wouldn't break, even when Mom tried hitting it with the mop handle. It was August in Florida. Even at night, the heat didn't let up. Mom said she tried to conserve energy, standing close to the door to listen, calling out until her voice gave out. All she could do was try to soothe Emily to stop her crying. Then the child started fading from exhaustion. The nearest neighbors were too far. No one heard a thing. By the second day, I still couldn't reach my mother. After 2 days at the conference, I handed off all my work to my assistant. When the car turned onto my street, I exhaled quietly, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Chloe's warning before I left had gotten under my skin. I parked, ran inside, and called out, "Mom! Emily!" No answer, no TV, no footsteps. The kitchen empty, the living room empty, the bedroom neat as when I'd left, but the lights were still on. My heart started pounding. Then I heard it, metal clanging against a door, faint, uneven. Coming from the bathroom in the garage, my hands shook so hard I entered the wrong code once. The second try, the door clicked open. Heat slammed into me like a wall. My daughter lay on the floor. Emily was curled up on the concrete, lips cracked, eyes glazed. "Sweetheart!" I dropped to my knees, pressed my hand to her cheek. It was burning hot. I screamed her name, desperate. "Emily!" Then a sound from inside, the rasp of my mother's voice, dry as sand. "Jess, here!" I shoved the table away from the door, pulled hard. The door creaked open. Mom stumbled out, leaning against the wall, her hair soaked with sweat, hands scraped raw. I grabbed my phone. 911. I need an ambulance immediately. My 5-year-old daughter was locked in a garage. Severe dehydration. My mother was trapped in the bathroom. I got her out. Her ankle's injured. Are they conscious? My daughter's barely responsive. My mother can talk. I unscrewed the water bottle I'd brought, wet Emily's lips, dripped tiny sips into her mouth. She tried to swallow, coughed softly, a trickle of water running down her chin. Slowly, baby. Her tiny hand weakly gripped my wrist. I held the phone tight to my ear, answering the dispatcher's questions in quick bursts. Mom leaned against the doorframe, her voice breaking apart. Robert did this. The world shrank to those 3 words. He waited for you to leave. Wanted to force. The transfer. Chloe. I looked at my daughter's cracked lips, the bruises up my mother's arm, the suffocating heat inside that garage. 2 days. Robert had locked his own daughter and my mother inside this oven. No water, no mercy. A layer of ice spread across my chest, solid and hard. The sirens grew louder. I lifted Emily into my arms, the other hand steadying my mother through the doorway. The paramedics burst into the house like a gust of cool air. They checked Emily's vitals, set up an IV, took my mother's blood pressure, scribbled notes. I stepped back half a pace to let them work, but kept holding my daughter's hand. As they wheeled the stretcher toward the door, Emily's eyes fluttered open, searching for me. I'm here. I climbed in beside her. Outside, the Florida sun was blindingly bright, almost cruel. But inside me, there was only one cold color left: resolve. The ambulance sped off, the siren tearing through the quiet weekend afternoon, and tearing apart the last fragile piece of softness I still had left for Robert. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. 2 paramedics, gear in hand, rushed into the house. One young woman knelt beside Emily, checking her vitals, firing off rapid questions. I stepped back to give her space. The blood pressure cuff, the fingertip pulse oximeter, the pen light checking her pupils, the IV line, all done in swift, practiced motions. A man, his badge read Rodriguez, scanned the garage, snapped photos of the door lock, the cement floor where my daughter had collapsed, and several wide shots of the scene, standard protocol in suspected abuse and unlawful confinement. The woman looked up at me. We'll be taking her to the hospital, then turned to my mother. And her too. In the ambulance, I sat along the side rail of the stretcher, one hand holding the IV bag, the other clasping Emily's free hand. She already looked visibly smaller in just 2 days. Her eyelids had closed, and her breathing was slower, more steady now that the fluids were flowing. She's stable, said Santos, the female paramedic, trying to comfort me. But just barely. 1 more day, and this could have been a different story. The words dropped like a stone. I swallowed hard. My husband had nearly stolen my daughter's life. The ER was chaotic but organized. Emily was taken to an exam room. My mother, Martha, had her leg propped up and her ankle wrapped. The attending physician, James Wilson, middle-aged, kind eyes, efficient hands, took over, examining them while asking questions. How long was she locked in? Any water? Estimated garage temperature? Medical history? I answered clearly. The diagnosis was short but heavy. Emily was severely dehydrated, showing signs of heat exhaustion. She needed to be hospitalized for intravenous treatment and monitoring. Martha had a sprained ankle and surface abrasions. No internal complications. Recommended for short-term observation. The child's young, and your mother's elderly. Complications can come fast, the doctor warned. I signed the paperwork and waited in the corridor while they were moved. That was when the full weight of reality crashed down on me. The man I had once loved, the father of my daughter, Robert, had locked his child in an oven for 2 days, shoved my mother and imprisoned her, all just to threaten me. The rage forming inside me wasn't loud. A nurse brought over the admission folders. Your daughter is in pediatrics, room 412. Your mother is in room 406. You can go in now. I walked the hallway, filled with the sterile scent of disinfectant and cold machine air. Emily lay still, IV in her arm, monitor beeping softly. Her skin had begun to regain a little color. Martha lay across the hall, eyes a bit brighter. I took her hand. "Go home, Jess," she whispered. "Do what you need to do." I kissed her forehead. "I'll be back in the morning." Her eyes met mine, steady and deep. "Robert is still Emily's father." I paused at the door. "No, he stopped being her father when he locked her in that garage." At 6:30 p.m., the fading sunlight painted the yard orange. Outside, the neighbors had no idea what had just happened. Inside, the air smelled like a house that had been closed all day. I didn't turn on many lights. I walked straight to the garage, stood in the doorway, staring at the space that had just held my child captive. The smell of sweat and fear still thick. I pulled out my phone and began recording everything. The keypad on the inner door, the high window out of reach, the concrete floor where Emily had collapsed. Wide shots to establish layout, close-ups of dirty handprints, drag marks, scratch lines on the door, the temperature reading on my phone, 93 degrees Fahrenheit at 7 p.m. I took photos of the doll lying limp on the floor, the dent where Emily had punched the door, the fallen shelf where my mother had tried to climb. This was evidence. Once finished, I drove straight to the police department headquarters. The night shift lights were still on. Detective Karen Morales was on duty. Sharp posture, sharp eyes, crisp movements. She sat and listened to my statement without interrupting, fingers gliding over her tablet, logging every timestamp. When I finished, she looked up. "Your husband no longer lives with your family?" "No, he's living with another woman." I handed her my phone, showing all the evidence I had photographed. She examined each image, nodding slightly. "This is criminal, Jessica. Based on your statement, we're looking at charges of unlawful confinement and child endangerment, possibly elder abuse as well." Morales drove with me to the house in an unmarked vehicle. She put on gloves, opened her evidence collection kit, took photos of the scene using a professional camera, dusted the keypad for fingerprints, retrieving multiple sets, mine, Martha's, and Robert's. She checked the lock mechanism. "When's the last time you changed this code?" "Never, since I bought the house." "Who knows it?" "Family?" "That includes Robert." She made a note, then paused when she spotted the camera on the floor. They were disconnected before the incident. "Do the neighbors have cameras?" I suddenly remembered the house across the street did. Tom had installed a ring last year. Morales crossed the road. Their lights were still on. Tom opened the door, and once she introduced herself, he pulled up the app immediately. The footage played. Thursday night, 7:14 p.m. Robert's silver sedan pulled up in front of my house. 7:17, he entered through the front door. 7:35, he walked out and drove off. The timestamps were as clear as ink on a page. Tom transferred a copy straight to Morales' tablet. "Use it!" That man doesn't deserve to be called a father. Back at my house, Morales was brief and firm. "I'll be contacting Robert for a statement." She recited it back. The scene, my mother's statement, Emily's medical condition, the ring footage, the fingerprints, the lock access. With all this, we have grounds for prosecution. The district attorney's office will decide the exact charges, but at the very least, unlawful confinement, child endangerment, and elder abuse. All felonies. How long will it take? I'll try by Sunday, Monday at the latest. If he cooperates, we'll issue the warrant. I nodded. In my mind, the list was already forming, in order: formal complaint, restraining order, civil attorney, Emily's medical records, and everything else I would need to protect my daughter permanently from the man once called father, but who no longer deserved the name. After Morales left, the house fell into silence. I stood at the threshold of the garage one more time, letting the cold in my chest solidify into something hard. From this moment on, Robert would face every consequence of the choices he had made. Back in the living room, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, body drained but mind wide awake. Enough evidence, she'd said so. Unlawful confinement, elder abuse against my mother, child endangerment against Emily. Robert had planned this, waited for me to leave before he acted. And Chloe? Did she know? Or was she the one who pushed him? The phone sat on the coffee table. 4 missed calls from Robert. 3 unread messages. The contents were shameless. Jess, call me when you can. We need to talk, seriously. It's important. Please call back. He was calling while my daughter was locked in the garage. Was that guilt? Or checking if I'd come home early? 10:47 p.m. The phone rang again. Robert. I let it go through 2 rings, 3. On the 4th, I answered. His voice was rushed, nervous. Finally, you picked up. About what happened earlier. I know you're angry, but let me explain. I panicked. I only meant to force your mom to talk to you, convince you. The money thing was supposed to be just a few hours, I didn't think. I stayed silent. Your mom and Emily. Are they okay? Are you home yet? 2 days, I said. The line went dead quiet. 2 days, Robert. You locked my daughter and my mother in a garage in mid-August. No water, no food. His voice cracked. I thought you were gone just one night. If only you... So you waited until I left town to trap my family, and your excuse is that my trip lasted longer than you planned? Don't say it like that, Chloe. No, I just panicked about the money. I thought if maybe... You thought you could extort me by torturing your own daughter? He snapped, voice rising. Don't use that word. Emily's in the hospital for severe dehydration and heat exhaustion. The doctor said another day, and we might be talking about a very different ending. Jess, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. No, Robert. Not a mistake. This was deliberate. My voice was low, steady. You waited until I was gone. You used the door code I gave you when you were still a husband, still a father worth that trust. I'm still Emily's dad, he shouted. No, you're a criminal who assaulted an elderly woman and left a child to bake in an oven. His voice faltered. If you'd just help me. I gave you $90,000 over 3 years. You never paid a cent back, and you used my money to fund the woman you're hiding. And today, you chose to endanger your daughter's life over cash flow, he panted. Chloe said you'd twist the story, make me look useless. I froze for half a second. Chloe. He realized his slip. No, I mean, she... You mean your mistress encouraged you to do something to pressure me, and you chose to lock up my mother and my daughter. That's not true. It's exactly true. This call is being recorded. My voice dropped to ice. I've already filed a report. The police are investigating. I have every piece of evidence. You'll face charges for unlawful confinement, child endangerment, and elder abuse. Please don't. I'm Emily's father. You should have remembered that before you left her. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I let it ring out. 3 more calls, then text. Don't do this to me. Jess, please listen. I'm sorry, but Chloe's pregnant. If I get arrested, I'll lose everything. I read every word slowly, painfully, then deleted them all. I sat there in the dark, the phone finally quiet in my hand. Almost midnight. Tomorrow, Morales would meet with Robert. The legal machinery was already turning, but legal consequences weren't enough. I needed to destroy everything Robert and Chloe had built, everything they depended on. I reached for my briefcase, pulled out a yellow legal pad, clicked my pen. At the top, I wrote one word: consequences. Below it, I began the list, each line straight as a pulled wire. Sunday morning, the Florida sun slammed through the kitchen window. I'd been up since 5 a.m., coffee cold on the table, the legal pad filled edge to edge with writing. At 9 o'clock, I started making calls. Family law offices, civil attorneys, estate planners. Most were closed. so I left the exact same message. Seeking representation for a civil lawsuit and estate planning related to elder/child abuse. By 3 p.m., a number I didn't recognize rang back. Jessica? This is Jonathan Pierce. Come by my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. On Monday, I sat in a corner office on the 14th floor overlooking the bay, full-height glass windows. Jonathan was in his late 50s, silver hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened as I spoke, didn't interrupt, just took precise notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. What's your objective? Every legal consequence must happen. Criminal, civil, financial. As for the relationship, he locked my mother and daughter in a garage for 2 days. There's nothing to reconcile. He nodded. In that case, the strategy will be direct. He stood, picked up a marker, and drew 3 columns on the whiteboard. Criminal, civil, family, estate. 1. Criminal. You'll support the detective, submit all evidence, be ready to testify. 2. Civil. We sue for IIED, false imprisonment, child endangerment. I propose a $250,000 claim based on medical costs, therapy, and damages. 3. Family, estate. File for immediate protection, no contact order, divorce, restrict visitation rights. Update your will. Simultaneously establish a trust to lock assets for Emily. I looked at the board like it was a financial ledger. This was a campaign, and Jonathan had just drawn the battle map. We start with the will and the trust. Agreed. The paralegal printed a draft within the hour. 7 pages of legal language, but the core was clear. All current and future assets would transfer into the Emily Trust, managed by an independent trustee. Any visitation or access to assets by Robert would be subject to court order and strict safety conditions. I signed the last page. 2 witnesses signed. The notary sealed it. Late afternoon, as we reviewed the civil suit filing, Jonathan's desk phone lit up. A message from the private investigator. Preliminary report ready. He turned the screen toward me. Bullet points appeared. Current rental address of Robert and Chloe. Lease set to expire. Employment records. Credit report. Total outstanding debt. Approximately $35,000. Assets. Virtually none. The investigator had also tracked Chloe's business ventures. Chloe's startup history. $18,000 spent on supplements. $25,000 on essential oils. $17,000 on wellness. 3 MLMs over 3 years. $60,000 gone. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. The $45,000 they asked for wasn't an opportunity. It was a lifeline. He typed in another line. Risk of losing housing soon. Pending felony charges. Flagged records. Likely eviction from new landlord. He looked at me, calm and deliberate. They chose this path. I nodded. And I'll make sure they don't skip a single consequence. I closed the notebook, the cold, clear feeling in my chest finally solidifying, step by step, not rushed, but precise, so Robert and Chloe would walk every inch of the slope they'd greased themselves. Act 6. I brought Martha and my daughter home from the hospital that afternoon. My little girl was discharged after 48 hours of fluids and observation. My mother looked better, color in her cheeks, light in her eyes, but she still moved carefully. At home, I had everything ready. Water bottles, medication, the TV remote. She sat on the bed, glancing around as if seeing it all for the first time. I sat beside her, holding her hand. She was home. She was safe. That evening, as I was brewing orange blossom tea for her, the phone buzzed. Robert. I looked at the screen for a moment, then answered, to let him bury himself deeper. Jess, please. I know you hired a lawyer. Don't do this. I panicked. That's all I leaned against the counter, watching the steam rise from the kettle, my voice steady. I've already filed the report. The police are handling it. There's nothing left to say. His voice dropped, pleading, full of words like mistake, family, until finally he shouted, What more do you want from me? I want you to lose everything you value more than your daughter's life. I don't value money over her. Not money? Then what? Chloe? He stammered. Chloe didn't know what I was planning. I swear I shot back. You said Saturday that Chloe predicted how I'd react. She knew exactly what I would do. Silence. Emily needs her father. I answered flatly. Emily needs safety. And her father locked her in a garage in mid-August. The silence stretched. I ended it. From now on, all communication goes through lawyers. I hung up, opened my contacts, and blocked his number. The screen went dark. The kitchen was quiet again, except for the faint whistle of the kettle. I texted Jonathan a summary of the call. A minute later, he replied, "Keep the log. Screenshot your call history. Don't respond again." I did exactly that. When I brought the tea to Mom, she asked how things were progressing. I told her about the lawyer meeting, the will, the civil suit being drafted, the financial investigation. She listened quietly, expression unreadable. Finally, she asked one question. Is this truly what you need to do? I need him to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't hurt people and walk away. She looked at my face and saw the change complete. Then do what you need to. I trust you, but softly, she added. Just don't let it consume you. I won't. I stepped into my daughter's room. She was asleep on the bed. I looked at her, then checked my phone. An email from Jonathan. The civil lawsuit was ready for review. Filing scheduled for Friday, unless I requested revisions. Wednesday morning, 9:15. The phone rang. Jessica, this is Detective Morales. I wanted to inform you. We arrested Robert about an hour ago. He's being processed. I set my coffee cup down, straightened my back. Charges? False imprisonment and child abuse endangerment. Bail is set at $25,000. There's also a no-contact order for you and Emily. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Thank you. I ended the call and looked at my mother. She closed her eyes briefly, exhaled. It's happened. I poured her more tea, speaking as if reading from a checklist I already knew by heart. He'll need $25,000 to post bail. Then wait for trial. Did they have that money? I remembered the investigator's report. $35,000 in debt, no assets, no savings. No, Martha said nothing. I immediately emailed Jonathan and Emily's pediatrician, updating them and requesting a medical statement confirming dehydration and heat exhaustion to include in the civil case file. The inbox showed received. At 2 p.m., an unknown number called. I answered. Jessica? A sharp, trembling voice mixed with tears. It's Chloe. What are you doing? You're his wife. How can you let Robert go to jail? I let her cry and ramble. He just panicked. I didn't know. You're being cruel. Then said clearly, each word measured. I've filed the civil suit. He committed multiple felonies. The police arrested him based on evidence. Evidence? You gave it to them? You could have let it go. Let it go? Why? He locked my daughter and mother in a garage for 2 days. He made his choice. Now he lives with it. Her voice cracked. He'll go to prison because you're too stubborn to help your own husband. I let the silence hang. Finally, I said, then start saving for his bail. I paused, then continued. You two have nothing left. $35,000 in debt. No assets. Your lease expires in 3 weeks. And Chloe, you burned $60,000 on 3 pyramid schemes. You didn't build a business. You built a fantasy. She went silent. When she spoke again, her tone had changed, calculated. You investigated us? I needed to know what I was up against. Perfectly legal in preparing a civil case, which I'll be filing Friday. On the other end, her voice turned threatening. We'll tell everyone you're lying, manipulating, jealous. I smiled. Tell it to the court. And bring evidence. I hung up, adding Chloe's number to the blocked list. An hour later, a friend texted me a link. Chloe had just posted a long rant on Facebook, calling me a manipulative woman, accusing me of exaggerating events to get revenge on her ex-husband, and implying I had fabricated everything to gain full custody. Her profile photo showed her standing next to Robert, with a shaky caption beneath. I didn't clap back online. I simply took screenshots of the full post, the comments, the timestamp, and forwarded the folder to Jonathan. 5 minutes later, he video called. Good. We'll send a defamation cease and desist immediately. Demand the post be removed within 24 hours, and that all copies be preserved in case we need to escalate. I nodded. Do it now. He promised it would be sent before 6 p.m. I returned to Emily, checked the room temperature, placed a small bell within her reach, confirmed this week's child therapy appointment. Everything was moving according to plan. The next afternoon, the email arrived. Cease and desist sent. At 6:10, Chloe's post vanished. On her feed, only the gray marker remained. This content isn't available. I opened my notebook and drew a clean line through one item. Defamation, removed. Then added the next goal. Serve civil lawsuit papers to both on preliminary hearing day. Night fell, and the house was quiet. Emily slept soundly, hugging her teddy bear. My mother sat in the armchair, with her eyes closed, resting. She looked up when I walked in, watching me for a long moment. Sometimes I don't recognize you anymore, she said softly. This version of you. The one without love. I know, I replied, and she reached out to give me a warm hug. But Jessica, she added, when will it end? I whispered back to her, as much to myself as to her. It ends when every legal consequence is enforced. Criminal charges, civil judgment, permanent removal from the estate, when he's lost everything. Then we move forward. He's not my husband anymore. Just someone I used to know. Martha closed her eyes. You're going to the arraignment? So, yes. I want to see his face when the charges are read. She looked at me again, her expression unreadable. Then finally she stood and headed toward her bedroom. At the door, she paused. I love you, Jessica. This version, and every version. But promise me something. What? I asked. She thought for a moment, then said, promise me that when it's over, when he's punished and pays and loses it all, you'll let go. That you won't carry this bitterness forever? I weighed her words. I don't hate him, Martha. I just don't love him anymore. I don't care what happens to him after this. He'll be a stranger to me, and I never want to see him again. She nodded slowly. Maybe that's worse than hate. Maybe, but it's honest. I sat still as evening deepened into night. The house was silent, except for the hum of the AC and the sound of my own breathing. Monday morning, I arrived at the courthouse. Security check, then the elevator up to the 4th floor. Robert and Chloe were already seated in the hallway, their heads leaned together, whispering in a rush. Robert wore a dark blue suit, broad in the shoulders, but wrinkled at the collar, eyes sunken with dark circles. Chloe stared at me, eyes hard. I walked past them without a word and sat on the opposite bench just as the courtroom doors opened. Judge Patricia Morrison stepped in, her voice crisp and firm. Case, State of Florida versus. Robert Hayes prosecutor Rachel Torres stood. The prosecution is ready, Your Honor. Robert's public defender, Sarah Chen, gave a faint nod. Torres presented with the precision of a scalpel. Emily's medical report. Severe dehydration, signs of heat exhaustion, crime scene photos, the neighbor's ring footage. 15 minutes. Enough to reconstruct the entire event. Sarah tried. This was a family conflict that spiraled beyond intent. The judge cut in, sharp. Locking a 5-year-old in a garage for 2 days in August is not beyond intent. That is grounds for prosecution. Sarah sat down, already defeated. I watched Robert the entire time. When they read the medical findings, he closed his eyes. When the garage photos played, his fingers gripped the table edge so tight they turned white. but he never once looked at me. The judge addressed him directly. This court finds sufficient cause to bind over. The no-contact order with Jessica and Emily remains in effect. Trial date is set for September 15th, 9 a.m. Bail remains as previously established. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. The gavel dropped. 27 minutes, clean, cold, and final. I stood, gave a slight nod to the prosecutor, and walked into the hallway. Just outside the courtroom, Robert and Chloe were handed the civil lawsuit papers: intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, child endangerment, with a proposed compensation of $250,000. Chloe burst into tears. Robert stood frozen, like he couldn't understand what language the word consequences was written in. That afternoon, Jonathan reported, "Complaint filed in the system. No contact order remains active." Everything continued rolling forward on track. I didn't respond to any of their messages. All communication, if any, would go through legal counsel. Thursday morning, an email from the private investigator. Robert and Chloe's landlord had sent notice the night before that their lease would not be renewed. 17 days left to find a new place. They scrambled for housing, but were met with rejections across the board. Sunday afternoon, a strange number flashed on my screen. I picked up. It was Robert. His voice was hoarse, worn down. "Jess, please don't hang up. I know I have no right to ask. I was wrong. We're about to lose the apartment. No one will rent to us. I'm going to jail. Everything's gone. Please. Help me." I let him speak until he ran out of breath. Then calmly replied, "Your mistake wasn't asking for money. Your mistake was locking your 5-year-old daughter in a garage for 2 days. The doctor said 24 more hours, and she might not have survived. You were 24 hours from murder. I didn't mean... Intent doesn't erase impact. You did it. Now you face the consequences. You'll go to court, take the ruling, and rebuild your life yourself." "Jessica, please," he begged. "I'm not your fallback anymore." I blocked his number, not because I feared he'd call again, but because I needed the finality that lived inside a single press of a button. That evening, Chloe tried a different route: Facebook. A long, emotional post. But this time, thanks to the defamation notice Jonathan had sent the week before, the post disappeared within hours. I saved all the screenshots, time-stamped every image. No online arguments. We'd speak in court. I didn't need to shout to win. I just needed records. Late at night, I stood at Emily's bedroom door. She slept peacefully, hugging her old teddy bear. I gently adjusted the thin blanket and softly closed the door. Tuesday. The full report from the private investigator arrived. Housing status: still no new place. Financial status: missed bail bond payment. Collections initiated. Employment: terminated August 30th. Credit score dropped. Civil case: 3 legal aid organizations declined support. Every domino had fallen. Friday, Jonathan called. His voice carried a hint of surprise. "Jessica, Robert's attorney just sent a settlement proposal." I stayed silent as he read. "They're offering $10,000 in compensation, a public apology, admission of wrongdoing, and a full waiver of any inheritance or asset claims involving you and Emily." I asked slowly, "Where would they get that money?" "All they could scrape together," Jonathan replied. "But the real value is in the terms: a formal apology, a written admission of guilt, and permanent surrender of any legal rights to Emily. They wouldn't offer this unless they were completely cornered." I sat quietly, watching the light outside the window. "What will you do?" Martha asked. I ran my finger over the typed words. I would accept, not out of forgiveness, but because this was the most complete victory. Emily would be protected, and the truth would be documented. He would admit everything. He would give up everything. He would break. Martha placed her hand over mine. Then let it end. Monday, we would return to court for the final time. That morning, Martha insisted on coming with me. "I want to be there when it's over," she said. We dressed professionally and drove downtown. The courthouse felt familiar now. One last time. The civil hearing was held in a smaller, quieter room. Judge Thomas Rodriguez presided. Jonathan Pierce was already there. Sarah Chen arrived with Robert and Chloe. Both looked exhausted, neatly dressed, but visibly tense. When prompted, Robert stood, pulling a folded sheet from his pocket. His voice was shaky, flat. I, Robert Hayes, apologized to Jessica and Emily for my actions. On August 15, 2025, I unlawfully confined my daughter and my mother-in-law in a garage, causing significant physical and emotional harm. I take full responsibility. He folded the paper and sat down, eyes fixed on the floor. The room was silent. There was no remorse, only procedure. The judge read back the agreement, confirmed its validity. The civil case is hereby closed. The gavel dropped, clean and final. Not long after, Jonathan approached. The prosecutor just confirmed. Robert entered a no-contest plea in the criminal case. The court ruled 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and a permanent no-contact order with me and Emily. Any violation could result in up to 10 years of incarceration. I asked, "What about Chloe?" "Currently being reviewed as a possible accomplice. Will proceed separately if there's sufficient evidence, but..." "She's pregnant?" I nodded. "Let the law take care of the rest." As I exited the courthouse, I saw Robert standing about 10 steps away, head bowed, hands clenched. His lips moved like he wanted to say something, but I just looked at him. No anger, no pity, only recognition. Then I took my mother's hand and walked past him, like passing a stranger I once shared a home with. Behind me, Chloe burst into tears. The elevator doors closed, and I knew that was the last time. That evening, I roasted chicken, Mom made salad. We ate on the porch, the sunset casting soft gold over the wooden table, in a silence that was peaceful. We talked about small things: Emily's parent-teacher meeting, her art therapy class, plans to set up a trust for her future. No one mentioned Robert. Both the civil and criminal cases were closed. 24 days since the beginning. I went into my office, opened my laptop, created a folder titled Closed, September 2025, moved every document into it, then shut it down. When I returned to the bedroom, my mother was already asleep. Across the hallway, Emily lay still, hugging her bear, her breathing steady. I stood quietly, looking at the 2 small women I had kept from falling apart. What I felt wasn't joy. It was complete peace. Justice had done its job. Quietly, slowly, and precisely. I turned off the light and whispered, "We're safe now." If you've ever gone on a journey to reclaim justice for yourself or someone you love, share your story in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss the voices and victories of those who've risen after being broken.